So it is now my pleasure to officially welcome to the stage our afternoon keynote, Anouk.
Hey, Melanie. Hey, everybody. First of all, I want to start with saying that this platform is amazing. I saw people join on my table and having a chat with me, sort of. So that's a really cool way to interact with each other, other than the Zoom conversations that we have to have the whole day. So this is super awesome.
Thank you so much for joining us. So you joined us from Miami today in your office, and it looks like you have some of your unique pieces behind you. Can you tell us a little bit about where you are and what we can see?
Of course, yes. So I'm a Dutch designer. So I'm from the Netherlands, and we do crazy stuff in the Netherlands. We have the possibilities to do so, I guess. I'm surrounded by some of my designs in my studio. So you see Agent Unicorn here on the side. It's a unicorn horn with a camera in there, and it works on EEG, so it works on brain signals. And it measures the brain signals of children, and in this case, ADHD is the topic that I'm doing research on. So when the brain signals when the focus is high, then the little camera goes off, and those horns are 3D printed. So it's a BCI and brain-computer interface. And what you have here is the spider dress that I created at Intel. It's the second version. The first version was in 2010, was all laser cut, which had a lot of like little tiny screws. So every time it went off, I had to like readjust the screws. So in 2015, I had the possibility to recreate this design with Intel. This dress is based with sensors. It's working with proximity sensors. So when you step close to this design, the shoulder mechanism is reacting, so it's almost attacking. So what I do is, I'm trying to answer the question, if and when we put technology on the body, what does it do other than like blinking and bleeping? How can you create interactions, for example, so my background is fashion design, couture tailoring, and also robotics and interaction design. And where I normally use a lot of like sculpting, like A and B components, epoxies and all of that stuff to host my electronics almost. In 2009, 2010, I got introduced to like 3D printing. So ever since I've been exploring these designs. So they're actually, 3D printed. Most of these designs are, design collaborations, and they're like, 3D printed.
And thank you so much. I mean, I just think it's so incredible what you do, because you take so many different realms of science and creative and bring those things together. So I think that's quite amazing. If you can, take us back to the very beginning, when you were first starting out your career as a fashion designer. What are some of the things that initially inspired you?
Yeah, that was about 20 years ago, and the world was not as weird as it is now, sort of, So I started myself with fashion design, couture tailoring. I thought it was interesting that fashion can express us. And I started when I was 14 years old, because you can do that in the Netherlands. You can start pretty early. And then when I was 17 years old, I got in robotics because, I don't know, it just blew my mind. I love robotics. And for me, it was like the brain and the heartbeat that I wanted my fabrics to have. So when I was 17 years old, I started to play around with microcontrollers, with, in that time, computer boards, like bigger computers, actually, in the beginning of 2000s. So a design looked nice from the front, but you turned around and it was like, rah! It was this really big system on the back of the design, for example, to what I'm working with now, like microcontrollers, really small boards from, you can work with Arduinos, you can make your own boards using PCB design software like Eagle, you can use Raspberry Pis. So you can both use like off-the-shelf products, or you can create your own, and that makes the field just so much fun.
That's awesome. And how has the shift to 3D printing changed your path or how you've approached your designs?
I think you can go from a design perspective. You can go in a much more delicate geometry, other than like sculpting a lot of things by hand, for example. I do a lot with the notion of more architectural things, architectural collaborations as well. So I think, you can really get in much more detail. You can make it like light enough. Especially the materials that I'm using often for the robotics, they need to sometimes be hard. Sometimes I work with soft robotics. Sometimes I work with the pieces that you can see here. The spider dress, for example, is needs a different material. So I think it's just really fun because you can explore with from the design perspective, it's a lot of things, but also from the material perspective, it's a lot of things, and especially when TPU, thermoplastic polyurethane, when more rubbery materials came in, like if you have normal print and Flex, for example, I think that suits really well for the body, so I think there's a lot of like interesting things that can be combined in order to create these things.
Okay, that's great. So when you're creating these designs and making them, what are some of the technologies that you use, both on the 3D printing side and also on the robotic side?
Yeah, I use a whole scenario of things during the day. It's like, the sewing machine to construct like fabrics and parts. I'm using like soldering iron to like, solder together like circuits, electronic sensors. I'm using, my computer to design. I have like, a 3D printer here, or I'm using a surface like Materialize, like Shapeways, I'm using Stratasys machines. And then also like laser cutter. So it's both, I think, like tools and also machines that I'm using in a day-to-day basis almost. And coding, like the laptop also to code your stuff all together.
Right. And with all these new technologies and high tech, how has the fashion industry responded or embraced or maybe even pushed back on this?
I think there's a lot of interest of like, manufacturing techniques, especially with 3D printing from, bags, from the more hard kind of things to jewelry. I did in a collaboration with Swarovski, for example. The fashion field, I think, is super interested in this notion, also like combining it with technology. Often these designs can be very customized almost, a spider dress is not something that you wear on the street right now, for example, so some of these things can be more in a couture notion, but there's also a lot of projects that are more ready to wear, and there's just a lot of ways that you can go about it, and that makes it just really fun to work with again, So I think there's, especially if you're talking about fashion tech, so the field that I'm busy with, combining fashion and technology. First of all, the technology industry got really interested, like I say, 10 years ago, because of the possibility that they might not be able to present a dress, but a dress with electronics is then all of a sudden really interesting for them because it's in hybrid almost, And I think like 5 years ago, the fashion industry got more and more interested because the problem with the fashion industry is almost something is in and the next week it can be out, out of fashion. We talk about, technology is more about upgrading and updating things. What I can see with my dresses, I update them, I upgrade them, and they live with me. So I think those, two systems, cycles almost still need to meet and what's happening in a few cases. And I think it should be much more because, it's just really interesting and, endless possibilities.
Yeah, and what you've been able to do by combining the technology with not only fashion, but high fashion and couture is incredible. I'd like to show another video clip now of the spider dress for those that might not be familiar with it, because it's just really incredible. So I'm going to go ahead and share that video and let people see a little bit more about this spider dress that you talked to that's also behind you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, somehow the sound here, but I think some people had some problems with that. But yeah, you can see there the basically the mechanism moving. So in robotics, if you talk about, we talk about degree of freedom. The more degree of freedom, the more movements and the more hinges, the more pivot points your robot has, the more you can do with it. And in this case, I used the notion of spider legs, or something like almost by mimicry, something taken from nature that in this case I put in my design. So yeah, you can see in here, the sensors are in front, they're measuring in front, and when somebody steps into the personal space, the design is attacking. So this dress was created in collaboration with Intel when I was working at Intel, and I was working with the Intel Edison, which was their small microcomputer. At that time, it was like 2014, 2015 that they introduced, which yeah, we were looking at how to do cool stuff with it, basically with the new devices group. So that is that's the design that you can see behind me.
I know you've mentioned some of the collaborations that you've done. I know you mentioned Intel recently. What are some of the other collaborations that you've done, and what are some of the favorite projects that you've worked on?
One really fun thing was like being an artist in residency at Autodesk. Autodesk had Pier 9, which was a really big manufacturing workshop where they invited some artists in, and I had the pleasure to come there and be back a few times over, I think, 3 or 4 years. They had like one of the first Object Connects 500 machines, which is a multi-material machine and a multi-color machine, which was really fun because it was the first time, other than like using a surface, it's also cool, you know, especially if you collaborate closely with a company. But yeah, working with your own machine, trying to figure that out, it was actually my first time that I could do that because of Autodesk and because of the Object Connects 500. So that was definitely cool. I've been working a lot with, from the entertainment industry, from Cirque du Soleil to Intel in Portland, Microsoft in Seattle, Autodesk San Francisco. I worked with Disney, Audi, Rolls-Royce, Volkswagen, a lot of like automotive partners, just to see about the connection between the car, vehicles, and the world and the body almost, you know. So I think there's a lot of possibilities for research out there to also 3D printing companies like Materialize. I'm from the Netherlands. They were in Belgium, and they were actually the first company that I ever been in contact with. In 2010, I went there through a friend of mine, Rijn van der Mast, and he introduced me to Materialize, which was doing incredible things back then already. So it has been like technology partners, entertainment industry partners, fashion industry partners, and also 3D printing and technology partners from the electronic side almost.
Yeah, and just like the diversity of the different elements that you pull together is just as a diverse client base. I'd like to show a couple little videos on some of the collaborations that you've done. I'm going to start with the Audi video.
Yeah, sure.
Hopefully we'll get the sound this time.
Yeah, and otherwise I can talk about over it. I don't hear the sound here, so I'm gonna talk over it. In 2015, I did a collaboration with Audi. They had a new car called Audi A4, and they invited me as one of the designers. So if you look up Anouk Wipprecht Audi A4, you can find more of the designs. It was a very like polygon style. And what I really liked about that collaboration was that, I was able to work with the design that I already had, like some design elements of the car, and putting that into these visuals, but the dresses were also reacting. So I took out the parking sensors and I took out the headlights of the car and put them in these dresses. So they were like, blasting out lights. We were, production mapping live on them with cameras, and we were doing all kinds of cool stuff with the 4 LED walls that they had, which was like super new at that time in 2015. For me, that project is really cool because just the notion of using the polygon style and the almost a triangle style, I think the DNA of the company Audi and my identity as a designer really merged there. So that's a really valuable collaboration.
Awesome. I'm going to share another video. This one is the Cirque du Soleil, the work that you did.
Yeah, this was 2 years ago. It was a little bit more like maker related. It was a tentacle dress. It was working on facial recognition, and we were working towards the notion of some concepting in the lab of Cirque du Soleil around fashion tech, and not necessarily like the theater that they normally do, but they had some fashion collaborations. So this was for the New York Fashion Week 2 years ago, and it was a dress with facial recognition, and when you smiled, these tentacles started to dance, sort of, you know. So it was this very aquatic almost design that was speaking a little bit towards making such concepts. So I had the pleasure to do that at the headquarters of Cirque du Soleil.
So you've done some really amazing things, and I'm sure you're working on some things now that we'll see videos of in the future. Is there anything that you can talk to us about to give you kind of a sneak peek into what you're doing now or what might be next for you?
Yeah, I work currently. I do a lot with sensing the surroundings, like the spider dress. It senses when people step into the personal space and it's attacking, almost pushing you out of the space, like, hey, you're coming too close. I'm doing also a lot with measuring the body, so from EMG to galvanic skin response to heart rate, HRV, respiration, so measuring the body. And one of the projects that I'm doing now is another one that's based on EEG. So working with the BCI that has 1024 channels, which gives you a really good resolution of the state that the brain is in, the brain signals. So that is one of the dresses that I think you also have a video about. It's called Pangolin. So that is one of the designs that I recently released, and I'm working on a new dress based on that. That is more looking into the different regions of the brain that I am researching. So it's a collaboration with the company DTech and the JKU University in Linz. And this dress, the Pangolin dress in particular, measures the 1024 channels, and it's a dress which is 3D printed, almost like an exoskeleton. And it has these little shields, pangolin like shields. It's inspired by that, with LEDs on it as well. And it has a direct connection to the BCI, brain-computer interface. So every channel is connected to a movement or a light within this dress. So if you are more hectic, the dress is more flashy. And when the model stepped into the dress, it was really freaking out, sort of. And later on, you can see that you can actually control this dress with your mind, because when you're in a neutral state, it goes more blue, more flowy. And if you're in a meditative state, everything goes purple, and it starts to really flow and wave, sort of. So looking at both the interactions and the LED, the LEDs, and also the interactions animation of the LED. And then in collaboration with the connection to the brain signal. So it's a direct connection from the brain to the dress, to this 3D printed dress almost.
Once again, completely amazing. Such a wonderful use of 3D printing that at least I would not have thought of, and probably most would not have thought of. When you talk about being able to measure some of the brain signals and that kind of thing, can you talk a little bit more about the sensors that are embedded in your technology and your fashion?
It's always different. Parts of the body want to be measured differently. Like muscle contraction, EMG, maybe you want to measure on places where muscles are. Of course, brain signals you want to measure in the place that the brain is. In this case, it is 64 PCBs, but each PCB has 16 sensors in there. So times 64 is 1024. So that makes all those channels. So that's an head-mounted sensor in this case. And we're really looking to the data from through the head directly, and putting that out to the dress. In this case, they are stick-on electrodes, so our models needed to be having a bald head. So our models were shaving their heads, and it was super cool. Like Daliette, our model, for example. Other devices, BCIs that I'm working with, like Asian Unicorn, has gold-plated electrodes. You can put them through your hair. But this was a really experimental project, in where we really need to have not any interference like hair or something. You know, if you're looking at Neuralink from Elon Musk, he goes in the head. That's a little bit dramatic for this project, for example, making holes in somebody's head. We wanted to be as close without any reference to the brain almost. So yeah, we're working with Daliette and Mackie in this case, our two models, and they shaved the heads for this basically this research. And in this case, the next step of that is working on that system, making it wireless. In this case, I want to look at the different regions of the brain for creativity from different things that are being triggered by the brain. We can see it light up in different ways, and I want to. The next dress is working again with EEG, but more specific with certain regions that we're using our brain signals with.
That's amazing, and I think also impactful on what you're doing, because it's not really just about fashion either. It's about being functional and being an extension of yourself, and like was mentioned in the video, being garments as protection, and you're kind of taking that to the next level as well.
Yeah, and I think also education is for me important. Some designs I really showcase in a really fun way. It's inspired by an animal. This is how the sensors go, where the sensors go. The spider dress especially, I really wanted to show all the wires where they go, sort of, So I think educational, it's also really fun to connect to to children, for example, or the maker in the maker space and the maker fairs that try to do a lot of things. And also, I think the last conversation with Dara Dots was in there, and she was talking about open source, for example, and I think these things are really important for us together as a collective, but also for a new generation growing up almost, that was one of the things that Dara told, just the importance of doing things like open source, whatever you don't use, you have on your desktop, either way. So how can you put that online? And that's not putting your everything online. That's just one specific thing that you might be able to open source, So that's kind of an important thing as well.
Okay, thank you. Well, thank you so much for chatting with me, Anouk. I'm going to ask some of the questions that are coming from the audience now. We have just about 5 or 6 minutes left, so I'm going to go through those. You did already talk a little bit about some of the projects that you're working on now. Is there anything else you want to talk about what you're doing now that we might see in the future?
I'm working together with one company in New York, which is a product. So for me, the product pipeline was always a little bit scary, but I dived into it for them now, sort of. It's a cool company, it's a BCI company called Vital Neural. For me, manufacturing and really getting a product ready is a really interesting thing, other than like making a prototype. Of course, if you go into product, it has a different pipeline. So that's really interesting. So making brain dresses and also working on helping some.
Once again, very diverse use of the technology and your designs. Another question that is getting a lot of votes is, what advice do you have for people wanting to get involved in this type of wearable robotics?
Robotics, buy an Arduino, download arduino.cc, start to code, start to program, buy an LED, or look at adafruit.com, sparkfun.com. From the 3D modeling, 3D printing side, you can look in software like Autodesk Maya, you can look in Fusion 360, CAD side, AutoCAD. You can look in things like Rhino, which is a little bit more like architectural. You can also think of things like Blender. It's an open source software from the Netherlands that gets more traction also amongst like architects and people, because I think, again, open source. I cannot explain it better, sort of, So if you want to look into it without exactly knowing if you want to really pay into this field by buying like expensive software, you can look at some of the open source software that is available right now. And Blender is created by somebody from the Netherlands, I need to say, because I'm Dutch.
Right, that's awesome. Another question is, do you know what market or types of people are interested in buying the 3D printed garments, since it's a newer fashion technology that people aren't used to yet?
Every day I get like a lot of requests from people like, oh, I want to buy your spider dress or your smoke dress, or like some designs are more complicated because it's a full-on robot, I have other designs that are easier. I have even designs on Instructables that you can make yourself. Instructables.com and Hexer.io, so you can also look there. I think like what I mostly enjoy doing, other than like a product pipeline and manufacturing stuff, is just creating new concepts, and I like to do that like weekly, monthly, and all of that stuff. So that is the biggest joy for me, to work towards either a project, a design research, and like a research thing. Maybe it's body, maybe it's sensors, a piece of technology, or sometimes I'm beta testing a piece of technology by making. And I think like, just creating stuff is just like really interesting for me, myself. There's other people that are looking more in the manufacturing of these things. We have a little bit problem with that. One is washability of technology. It's the biggest enemy, as we know. I know that a lot of people from the field, washing machine companies, are making at the moment washing machines that can wash electronic fabrics, which is really cool. So that's the industry coming in. Also battery and power, how can we work with things that are not LiPo batteries, or like batteries how we know them? How can we work with solar, with kinetic energy? We all move, So I think from the industry, there needs to be a little bit more, coming in towards these kinds of practices, because how can batteries become more organic, more round? How can we work on our own body movements and all of that stuff? But I think because this field is fairly new, it's what I say, like I've been doing this for 20 years. Really traction we got like 12 years ago, I think, but that's still a fairly new field. So I think the more the industries are talking together, the more we all can do with each other almost.
Great. Well, I think we have time just for one more question. So I'm going to go with the one that has the most votes. That is, do you sculpt your design manually, either physically or in CAD, or do you implement algorithms to generate the geometry?
You can think of, I've been playing around with like Rhino recently more. You have now the new version of Rhino. I think it's interesting. You still need to have like the body in there. So, but it depends on how you approach it. I come from like a sculpture background. So in the past, when I was, before 3D printing, I was sculpting everything. So that is how I would approach many of these things. And it always depends on what the project is, if it's planes, if it's polygons, if it's more intricate designs, you know. And it also depends on, sometimes I do collaborations with, for example, architects. And it's always what, like, for example, a trending topic is or a solution almost. And also the software that you're using or that sometimes you have to use because you're working with a company. So it depends on the approach to that.
Okay, that's great. Well, I just want to leave the final couple minutes with you, Anouk, if you have any closing statements. And thank you again for being with us. Thank you for the inspiration. Thank you for paving the way for people who want to think outside the box. So I'll leave it to you for your closing statements.
Oh, thank you. No, I think it's great what you're doing. I love to be on an all female this event. That's just a crazy thing. I've never experienced that, and I was just thinking to myself that that's a crazy thing that this might be the first time for most of us to do it this way. So thank you so much for organizing that. And yeah, I love to talk to you all more. If you want to know a little bit more about me, it's anoukwipprecht.nl. I will send you the websites here as well. If you have any questions of getting into electronics or something like that, hit me up, and I hope to answer your questions. As far as I can. I'm just sending you the links in the chat. And that was it, I think.
Okay, well, thank you very much. I'm going to turn it over to Nora now.